Guys, what if I told you handling objections in sales? What if I told you there was a better way? Check this video out and I'll tell you how to get around even having to address objections. Now, the truth of the matter is, you don't need to handle objections if you are transparent. Now, I'm going to tell you how you can circumvent objections altogether. But before I do that, I want to tell you why it's important. Let's use an analogy. Imagine you're on a date. Date's going really well. And now all of a sudden, you start getting weird questions, right? Have you ever been in that situation where everything's going nicely and you start getting these strange questions and the vibe changes? Well, guys, that's what happens in sales, you see. It's not about handling objections. The truth of the matter is, when somebody has an objection, they've already moved out of the buying zone. Their mindset has changed from what is possible to what could go wrong. So you've essentially moved from a mindset of abundance, a mindset of improvement, because typically, if you're selling something, that's what you're selling improvement. But you're going from that to, what are the risks here? This sounds too good to be true. So, handling objections, guys, it's a fundamentally flawed concept. It is essentially you playing defense. Now, I'm not saying that you always want to be on the offense. You don't want to always be on the offense. No, you want to have a to and fro exchange. You want to have a back and forth, because as you do that, again, just like being on a date, for example, now you're making connection, okay? So the best way to handle an objection is to avoid them altogether. So how do you avoid it? Well, guys, let's get into it. Now, the truth of the matter is this, guys. Every product, every service has a risk. Don't be foolish and don't be egotistical enough, particularly if you're a founder, to think that your product is foolproof. Because the absolute truth of the matter is, there are factors that are out of your control that can create a bad experience for your client, for your prospect. There is not one single product out there that is 110% totally foolproof. Even if it is 110% totally foolproof, and even if all the economic conditions are in your favor, the people that are using your service, that are using your product, might just fuck it up. So there are always risks. So the key is, guys, addressing those risks, addressing any potential elephants in the room before the prospect brings them up and starts using them as an objection. You want to make it easy for people to say yes. Let's talk through this practically. You're having this conversation, everything's going well, maybe you're going through a presentation. You know that the objections and the skepticisms are going to come. Guys, you need to know, you need to sit there and actually play devil's advocate with your solution. Be honest and say, you know what, if I was on the other side of this buying process, forget about all the good stuff. I'm going to list out every single reason why I wouldn't buy it, whether those reasons are founded or unfounded. I'm going to list them all out. I'm going to list out every single skepticism. So the first thing you need to do, guys, is list out every single reason somebody would not want to do business with you. List out every single thing that could go wrong. List it out. You know what? Even exaggerate it. Okay? It's better to be more skeptic than less skeptic. It's better to play devil's advocate in-house and figure out what you're going to do about that than it is to actually sit there and handle objections. And I'll tell you why. Now, throughout your sales process, throughout your pitches, throughout your presentations, you want to get to a point where you are totally transparent about these risks. I would actually dedicate a slide to it. If you're doing presentations, if you're on a phone call, I would actually be like, hey, I want to be totally frank with you about something. And that's that this could happen. This could go wrong. We are mindful of it. And run off a list. This could happen, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. Now, I'll give you an example. So some of you may have heard this before, but my business partner, Nicholas, and I, we met after the GFC working in financial markets together, and we used to sell funds and we used to sell research. Now, we used to work for a really prominent funds and research house here in Australia. Now, Australia is extremely compliant. So actually in Australia, particularly when it comes to financial products, you can't lie. You have to actually be totally forthcoming. Now, what I found was, by being forthcoming, I was giving myself a competitive advantage. But I want to give you an example of what I mean by forthcoming. So, The firm that we worked with had a great track record that over a multi-year period, 4 out of 5 recommendations would do well. But the truth of the matter is, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't guarantee that 4 out of 5 recommendations will continue to do well in the future. Furthermore, not every recommendation does well, right? 1 out of 5 is almost certainly going to flop. So by coming out and addressing that, and by being totally frank about that early on, people actually became empathetic towards us, and they would say things like, oh, of course you can't get them all right. Of course you don't have a crystal ball. So instead of pretending to have a crystal ball, and instead of pretending that we were batting 1,000, we were honest, and we were like, no guys, like, it's not going to work like that. However, what I was then able to do was then offset that risk by sharing a mutual interest and saying, you know, but at the end of the day, if our recommendations do poorly, then you're not going to renew with us. You're not going to stay on board with us. Our clients aren't going to stay on board with us. So it's in your interest, and it's in our interest actually, that we are extremely diligent, extremely transparent, and are striving for excellent return on investment, striving for an excellent strike rate. Now guys, by doing that, now what I was able to do is take those risks, address the elephant in the room, and actually put them smack bang in the middle of the conversation, have an honest conversation about it, and share my motivation and share the motivation of the firm that it is in none of our interest for you to experience this risk, but let's be honest about it. Now we're in this together. Guys, furthermore, we were honest about the fact of why those risks could occur. So for example, it wasn't because our analysts were lazy or our analysts weren't thinking. They were doing their homework. It's just sometimes things change in the market. Maybe there are bigger economic global headwinds that are going to impact some of our recommendations. Maybe there's something internally that's happening within that organization that we're not privy to, that is going to change the trajectory of that organization. Whatever it is, we don't just want to talk about the risk. We actually want to be very forthcoming about how that risk occurs and what could actually trigger that risk, right? And by being really honest about that, now you move from salesperson to consultant. And now when you're consulting and advising, you're actually earning more trust. Now, the reason it's really important to do this, and the reason it's really important that you're forthcoming about this, now you can control the narrative around the risk, right? So instead of being on the back foot and handling objections, yuck, you're now controlling the narrative of the risk, and you're creating a story and a vision inside the prospect's mind that you are in control of. Now, be honest about that story so you can feel good about it as well. We're not here to lie. We're not here to BS. You don't need to lie. It's not about lying. It's about honesty. It's about transparency. This brings me to my next point about how it's going to give you a competitive advantage. Guys, chances are if somebody's registered their details with you, chances are if you're doing outbound, that this person has registered their details with somebody else as well, probably 2 or 3 other organizations. Chances are that there are 2 or 3 other firms who are doing outbound and trying to reach out to this person as well. So the fact that you're out here being honest about risk, being forthcoming, addressing the elephant in the room, telling the story about the risk, talking about how you're offsetting that risk or what your commitment is or why it's important that those risks are mitigated, if possible, neutralized, you are now being totally transparent while the other 2 or 3 competitors who are out there looking at that same client are not. What are they doing? They're handling objections. I'll be frank with you. I think 4 out of 5 times the prospect knows what the risks are. But they're actually testing you to see if you're forthcoming, to see if you're transparent. Because remember, people don't necessarily buy products. People buy from people, right? That's why sales reps exist. That's why you have a job. That's why you're doing this. Okay, is because you need people to get deals done in the vast majority of industry, particularly if you're doing B2B sales. So now all of a sudden, you're the trustworthy person. You're the person that's being totally upfront. You're the person that's actually talking about what could go wrong, how you can navigate that. You're giving the client the insight as well to make an informed decision, while 2 or 3 other people are just bullshitting. And not only that, they're in objection handling mode. So while you're moving your client forward and they have a good understanding of their risk profile, your competitors are just playing defense. They're just playing defense. Good. Let them play defense, guys. But the problem I have with that is If somebody is objecting to you, if somebody is putting up a guard, they're probably having a bad time. Guys, this is the worst thing about sales, right? Is that when you're in this constant mode of objection and people are then trying to remedy your objection, it's frustrating. That's where people start feeling pressured. That's why people think that salespeople are, sleazy, to be honest with you. And that bothers me, obviously, because we make our living doing this and we don't want to be sleazy and we don't want to be considered sleazy. But the truth of the matter is, when you're sitting there handling objections, you're going to come across as a slimy person. You're going to come across as somebody who is not letting your client say no. This brings me to my final point, guys. Instead of handling objections, create a safe space for your prospect to say no. You see, we can live with a no. We can handle it. We'd like to know why it's a no, so we can adjust our product, we can adjust our messaging, we can share it with leadership so the leadership teams can really be cognizant of market sentiment and where the consumer is at. But you're never going to make that improvement unless you make it safe for the prospect to say no. Now, guys, if you're not making it safe for the prospect to say no, I promise you this, I assure you this, you're going to feel like shit about your job. You are going to feel crap about what you're doing, and you're going to wake up and you're going to strut in and you're going to be like, I'm just going to close this person and I'm just going to smash it. And you're going to come across as forceful, right? How much force can you apply day in, day out to a specific scenario before you start getting tired, before you start feeling like shit, right? How much? What if you didn't need to apply force? What if you could be a smooth operator, right? One of my favorite songs, where you can lay out all the risk, you can allow the client to assess their risk. You can tell the client what your commitment is to mitigating that risk and why it's important. You can tell the client about why these factors of risk occur in the first place. And now you're treating your client, your prospect, with enough respect that they can make an informed decision. And if that informed decision is no, so be it. Because typically it's those clients who are putting up the most resistance that you squeeze in that end up making your life hell anyway, right? Because they're having a bad time and now you're having a bad time. So you can avoid all of that, give yourself a competitive advantage, keep your soul and your spirit and your energy intact by being totally forthcoming about the risks. Fuck handling objections, guys. It's not necessary whatsoever. It's old school, guys. It's not 1995 anymore. Shit, it's not even 2005. It's 2025. Be transparent, guys. This is why there's Google reviews. Let's be honest. How many of you, when you watch a Google review, click the worst possible reviews? Right? Because I can go to a website or I can go to a restaurant that's got 1,000 Google reviews, right? And 950 of them might be 5-star. I want to see that 5% of shit reviews. I want to see what my risk is. And then I want to then be able to assess my risk and make an informed decision. So guys, have enough respect for your prospect to help them make an informed decision. No need to handle objections. Be upcoming about the risks. Give yourself a competitive advantage. Let's change the game. Let's raise sales standards. Let's take the game to a new level. Let's feel good about the work we're doing. Let's let our prospects feel good about the conversations that we're having with them. And let's make some money. Guys, if you're enjoying the content, if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. We've got a very small channel over here. We're working really hard to raise selling standards. At the core of what we're doing is just trying to live a better life, trying to do it ethically. So we're going to be covering so many things, but your support really means a lot to us. And we're very flattered for those of you who have taken the time to subscribe and engage with our content. Thank you very much. I look forward to the next video.